What's up, everybody, and welcome in to another edition of the Sit Down. As always, if you enjoy this video, please make sure you hit that like button and let me know what you think of today's discussion in the comment section below. If you're new around here, you just haven't done it yet. We're living on a rock and seeing this video for the first time. I don't know what you're waiting for. Hit that subscribe button below now so you never miss another Sit Down video. This video is powered by Profit X. Profit X is the official sponsor of the Sit Down. And I know a lot of you right now are getting excited for football. It is returned. College football is in full force. The NFL began on Thursday. We've got our first week 1 Sunday card tomorrow. If you like to wager on football, it's important that you're getting the best lines in the business, and Profit X will deliver them to you. Make sure you're jumping aboard, going down to the pinned comment and getting an account with Profit X. And also, just to let everybody know, if you're in the states of California, Texas, Alabama, Alaska, states that don't have legalized sports betting, you can use Profit X. It is a sports betting exchange where you set odds and bet odds set by others. Get involved right now with Profit X. Football is here, folks. Click the link in the pinned comment. Today, ladies and gentlemen, we're going to get in to another organized crime topic. And the Colombo Crime Family has had many very dangerous individuals in their ranks throughout the years, whether it was Sonny Franzese or Greg Scarpa. The Colombo Crime Family might be the most violent of the 5 families. We've also seen them produce young criminals such as Dino Calabro, a man who we've talked about on this channel. Calabro was a part of a group called the Bay Parkway Boys, and they were dealing a long time in reckless abandon. One of Calabro's closest friends was this guy, a person called Joseph Competiello. They called him Joey Caves, and in talking with multiple people that knew him, they would tell me he is one of the most violent people they have ever been around, and he was a, quote, nutcase. The story of Joey Caves Competiello next on the Sit Down. Joseph Competiello was born in 1971 in Brooklyn, New York. At one point, he would live in the area of 73rd Street and 21st Avenue in Bensonhurst, Brooklyn. Now, we do know that 75th Street and 20th Avenue is not far away, and Joey Caves was a mainstay on that block for years growing up. It was said that Joey Caves' father, Angelo, actually owned a landscaping company called Angelo Competiello Landscaping. And down the road, Competiello's involvement in the streets and in the mafia were a problem for his father. He wasn't able to get certain licensure, be involved in certain unions, because they're going to look into your family, and his son was a mobster. Now, it was said by his teens, according to city court documents, Competiello would serve time in prison, most notably on Rikers Island, for various assault cases that he caught in the early 90s. Now, as I said, Competiello was a mainstay in and around 75th and 20th Avenues in Bensonhurst, and the kids on that block included Dino Calabro. They were involved in everything from stealing cars to committing robberies. Competiello actually had a chop shop. He would steal cars, chop them down, and sell them for parts in Brooklyn. And his violent ways started very early. According to what we know, in the early 90s, Joseph Competiello was involved in murdering a person called Joseph Michio. According to what we know, Michio was a subordinate of Mr. Competiello, but started to get involved in his own things, started stealing cars from a restaurant that was belonging to the Gambino crime family. People got tired of Michio, and Competiello allegedly shot him multiple times in the head and pushed him out of a vehicle in Brooklyn. So that was the first time that we know that Joseph Competiello committed a murder. Now, we would find that throughout his time in the mafia, Mr. Competiello was involved in various murders, and he would talk about them. Eventually, Competiello, as well as Calabro and other members of the Bay Parkway Boys, would become affiliated with members of the Colombo Crime Family. They become under the control of longtime Colombo member, Thomas Tommy Shots Gioeli. Now, we've done a video on Gioeli as well. He was kind of the guy behind all these guys. He was the mentor of all these people. He was the director of all these people, and he was the captain of all of these people. We also know that people in this group, particularly Dino Calabro, Joey Caves, and Dino Saraceno, were quite close. They were boyhood friends. They had been friends for years. And these are people that were very violent individuals. Now, Joey Caves and both Dino Calabro as well discussed that in the early 90s, they were called upon by Tommy Shots to do what they had to do in the Colombo War. According to various testimonies, they would testify that Gioeli said he needed all of them, including Calabro, Richie, Dino, and Joey, whenever he was around, to drive him around and drive around with guns. They would testify that our orders were to shoot and kill on sight if we saw any members of the opposing faction during the Colombo War, and said that Gioeli said that he would point them out to them. Calabro also testified, as well as Competiello, that he and others drove around social clubs, homes, businesses with guns looking for Vic Arena members, specifically testifying that they searched directly around the Avenue N Cafe to locate Joey Scopo, a high-ranking Arena faction member. Competiello and Calabro would also testify that Dino Saraceno was involved in an attempt to locate and kill an Arena faction member known as Bobo. We will know down the road that that was Bobo Malpiso. The jury would properly draw the inference that if Saraceno was looking for Arena faction members, he was looking for them for the purpose of shooting to kill. As we know, Tommy Gioeli ordered. Now, we do know that both Competiello, Calabro, and also Gioeli were not only burglars and robbers, but they were also loan sharks. And Gioeli would instruct both Calabro and Competiello to collect loan shark debts. At one point, Competiello would state that he was going after a person called Peter Risk that owed money, and that if he didn't give up the money, to quote, break his face off, according to Calabro. Now, Calabro would down the road state that Saraceno told Calabro that Saraceno had searched for Peter Risk and that Saraceno and Competiello, quote, stabbed him. Competiello would similarly testify that he and Saraceno chased down Peter Risk and stabbed him while asking Risk why he had not called Calabro back in regards to a debt that he owed them. So Competiello was a very important enforcer, not only to beat up and stab loan shark debtors, but also to kill. And most people that I've talked to about Competiello, they would tell me that he had those deep, dark eyes that just are killer eyes. He was a nutcase, many people would tell me, and he was very good with his hands. He could beat people up. He could use a gun. He was very helpful to people like Tommy Shots. And this is why Tommy Shots down the road would have a very fierce reputation. When somebody needed to go in the late 90s, early 2000s, the Gioeli crew was called upon. Here, all the guys can be seen at the wedding of Joseph Competiello's sister. On the far left, Dino Calabro, then Joey Caves, Dino Saraceno in the blue, and then Tommy Shots to the far right. Now, during the Colombo War, it was said that Joey Caves participated in the June 1991 murder of a man called Frank Chestnut Marassa. Now, we don't have photos, obviously, of Joseph Michio or for a person called Richard Greaves, who we'll talk about. Some of these guys don't have photos. But Chestnut Marassa was killed in 91, and down the road, Competiello was given that murder on his docket. One of the most depraved murders that Mr. Competiello was involved in was in the 1994 murder of a man called Carmine Gargano. Now, as far as we know, Carmine Gargano, it was said by some, was a mob associate. And I'm not saying he was. I'm only stating what certain people say. All as far as we know is his family would say that he was not connected to the mob and was actually a college student at Pace University. It was said that, according to Dino Calabro, Joseph Competiello shot Mr. Gargano multiple times in a garage that he owned. I'm going to get into some of the other things that Dino Calabro stated about the murder of Mr. Gargano. He would state that Competiello would tell him as to why he killed Gargano, quote, Competiello, I don't know. I just felt like it. I was upset. Now, Competiello would then state to Calabro, what do I do with the body? Dino would state, I don't care what you do with the body. Throw him out of a car, bury him, just get rid of him. Now, it was also stated that Competiello would tell Calabro that once he shot Mr. Gargano, he was a big kid and he didn't go down, to which Competiello stated he would then beat him multiple times with a sledgehammer, ultimately killing him. Carmine Gargano's body and remains were missing for years, and he was reported missing for years by his family. These are some very violent, very depraved murders. They would then take Gargano and, according to Competiello, bury him in a shallow grave. In 1995, the cohorts would take part in murdering a person called Richard Greaves, who was actually a member of the crew. He was a mob associate. He was a person who cannot be made due to the fact that he wasn't fully Italian, but he was there with all the guys in 20th Avenue. He was there taking part in murders. He was taking part in robberies. Eventually, though, Richard Greaves decided that he had a change of heart and did not want to be a part of the mob anymore, to which this group decided, well, he needed to go. He knew too much, to which he was whacked out, supposedly, in a house belonging to Joseph Competiello's family. It's alleged after the fact, according to what we know, Competiello and Sebastian Saraceno testified that Saraceno shot Richard Greaves with a .38 caliber gun in the presence of Tommy Shots Joelli. They would then testify, both Saraceno and Competiello, that they cleaned up the murder scene and took Greaves's body and buried it in a shallow grave and took his Jeep to a location near the Verrazano Bridge. It was said later that Competiello would then begin having sex with Richard Greaves's girlfriend. So that's what they do. They take you out, then they start banging your girlfriend. That's the life. Competiello was then involved in a very high piece of work, profile piece of work, allegedly on behalf of a man called Joel Joe Waverly Cicale. Now, Cicale down the road would beat this murder, though a lot of the things involved in it just seemed too good to be true. In 1997, a New York City police officer by the name of Ralph Doles was shot late on a Friday night in 1997. The two shooters that night were said to be Dino Calabro and little Dino Saraceno, Calabro's cousin. Now, this was given on orders of Tommy Shots on behalf of Joe Waverly, and that Calabro was the shooter. Now, the wheelman in this murder was said to be Joseph Competiello. So all of these people just took part in the murder of a cop, which, again, unless you are a drug cartel, is highly off limits. Now, Competiello, Calabro, and Saraceno would all state that they did not know that Mr. Doles was a cop. They were told that Doles was a, quote, Mexican who worked at a social club. We would find out down the road that Ralph Doles was married to the former wife of Joel Waverly Cicale. Seems a bit random, doesn't it? Now, down the road, Cicale would somehow beat the rap in this murder, but Doles was still just as dead. Very sad case involving one of the NYPD's finest. Now, the most high-profile murder that Mr. Competiello and his cohorts would take part of would begin in 1999. The Colombo Crime Family realized they had a real problem on their hands in terms of leadership. Ali Boy Persico, the boss, is in prison. Jackie DeRoss, the number 3, had people breathing down his neck. And the underboss at the time, they believed Wild Bill Cutolo was a major threat, and he was. Wild Bill is one of the most underrated mobsters in the Colombo Crime Family of all time. And sadly, the Persico family ruined that family in terms of the mob. Mr. Cutolo should have led this family. He was feared, he was respected, and he made a ton of money. By May of 1999, the Colombo crime family knew that Cutolo needed to go, and the contract was given to Mr. Joelli and his crew. From what we know, Mr. Cutolo was picked up by Tommy Shots, and they were driven to a home in Brooklyn that belonged to the family of Little Dino Saraceno. Now, upon getting out of the car, Wild Bill Cutolo was met by Dino Calabro, who was just an associate at that time. And I think at that point, Calabro knew something wasn't right. He would say to Calabro, "Alley Boy's here," right? They would walk him to the back of the home. It's like a side entrance to a door. As they walk down the stairs, Calabro pulls a gun out, shoots Cutolo multiple times. They then put the body in a blue tarp. Competiello and his cohorts take that to the mass burial grave on Long Island and get rid of the remains. Now, in 2004, by this point, Caves has been involved in a lot of crimes, a lot of murders, been involved in a lot of things. And that year, it was said Joey Caves was inducted into the Colombo crime family. Dino Saraceno also got his button, as well as Saraceno's brother. It wouldn't last long, though. After the induction and being placed in the crew of Tommy Shots in 2008, the Colombo crime family got some bad news. All of them were indicted. Competiello, Tommy Shots, Little Dino, Big Dino, everybody got arrested and had to face the long possibility of never seeing the light of day again. There were murders, there was racketeering, there was really everything that you dread as a mobster. Look back at all the things that Competiello was involved in. You look at some of these things in the indictment: the conspiracy to murder Frank Marassa, the murder of Frank Marassa, the hit on Richie Graves, Bill Cutolo, Joseph Michio, Ralph Dole. I mean, there's all sorts of hits here. And when you were a mobster and you were involved in a racketeering indictment, the goal is to avoid violence. If you can avoid violence, you can get a favorable conviction, a favorable plea. But Competiello isn't stupid. They're not. These guys aren't stupid. They're not. They're smart guys. They know in the end, the writing is on the wall. Now, it was said that in the 90s, Mr. Competiello was approached by the FBI to cooperate, which he fervently declined. That said, just months after his arrest in 2008, Mr. Competiello decided that he would do the unthinkable. He would become an informant. Now, what would happen is really a domino effect, because once Competiello starts talking, he implicates Dino Calabro, who starts talking as well. And both of these guys were facing life. They weren't going to ever get out of prison, and they knew it. They were on the hook for a cop killing. They were on the hook for multiple murders. And what happens is not only does Competiello flip, he leads the charge in other people flipping. And then down the road, everybody gets screwed in the end. This group, who was very accomplished, they did a lot of hits, a lot of things that went on. They were all going to go down, whether it was cooperating or being convicted or going to prison. Now, what Competiello would also do is really find out and give the FBI information on the mob burial ground. He would help locate the body of Mr. Cutolo. He would help, find an end for the Gargano family, that vicious murder that he participated in and did in 1994, beating a man with a sledgehammer after shooting him multiple times. He put some ends to some very sad cases, and their families at least got a little justice. Competiello would take the stand and at one point be admonished by a judge in this case after he made hand signals to Tommy Shots. There is, again, one thing that I will continue to state about Mr. Competiello. Regardless of whether he is a rat or not, he is a very, very dangerous individual. And I said the same things about Junior Pagan when I interviewed him. You can say what you want about Pagan, but a lot of people feared him in the streets and probably still do, as well as Competiello. These guys weren't, sweet. They weren't, this is why you don't see these guys really on YouTube. They're not built like that. They still are gangsters. They flipped, but they're still tough, and they'll still blow your head off if they need to. Competiello, as far as various people I talked to, said the same thing about him. In the end, Competiello would give a lot of info. And this would hurt a lot of people. Tommy Schatz would be sentenced to a long prison sentence. Little Dino Saraceno is still in prison. He would ultimately get 50 years. He still sits there. Joe Waverly went to prison for about 20 years. In the end, Joey Caves would receive 12 years. Remember, this is a man who participated in nearly a dozen murders, possibly more. He robbed people. He, extorted people. He beat people up. He stabbed people, did all sorts of things. Today, Joey Caves is 54 years old, approximately 54 years old. And from what I understand, lives in New Jersey somewhere. I know where he lives. I'm not going to state where, but he does live in New Jersey. I will say this, and I'm not really sure why I'm going to protect this guy. But from what I understand, and I've talked to various people on this, but I consider myself a half a journalist, and I'm not going to bring on something that I don't have full proof of. But from what I understand, Joey Caves dished a vicious beating to someone on YouTube right now inside federal prison. They were on, cooperation unit, and Joey Caves gave the business to a person I'll notify as just DC. You can do the rest as far as figuring out who that is. But you know who you are. You know Joey Caves gave you a beating. We've all heard about it. But that's that. Joey Caves, very violent individual, a very violent person who is trying to move on in his life. A lot of the crimes. Remember, Joey Caves, when he was arrested, was only 36 years old. I'm 36 years old. Joey Caves was arrested. He did all this stuff by 36. Got involved with the life in his teens, spent about 20 years in it. And now he's, not an old man, but he's getting older. He's in his 50s, mid 50s. He has to live with some of the things that he did. And it further shows us the kind of wildness of cooperation agreements, right? You look at Calabro and Mr. Competiello, people that were friends from their teenage years on. These are guys that are responsible for a dozen or so murders. They are both on the street living somewhere in America. This is why I would always advise people, and I've had my fair share of talking stupid in public. This is why you never talk stupid in public, because you never know who you're talking to. It could look like some old man and they killed 20 people and they flipped and now they live next to you in Iowa somewhere. You can never be too careful. But one of the most violent people over the last 25 years in the Colombo crime family, Joey Caves, Competiello, a wild story. And really the story of the Bay Parkway Boys. A lot of people in that group flipped. Some didn't. Some are still out there. I hope you enjoyed this video. If you did, make sure you hit that like button, comment, and if you want, send a super thanks. Hit the thanks button under the video. We'll see you next week here on The Sit Down.